Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse. It's May 13th, 2026. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. For those of you who are new to Office Hours, this is where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. So real quick before we get started, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse has developed the ultimate IAC framework. It's called Atmos. If you haven't heard about it and you're running Terraform or OpenTofu, you should check it out. Go to atmos.tools. A quick note on how to get the most out of today's session. The format is informal. You can engage as much as you like. You can ask questions. And if you don't want to participate live, you can always just post them in the chat. If you're curious about any of our open source tools, this is a great place to ask. Just bring that up when we get to the Q&A portion of the show. If you're watching the recording, keep these and you want to join these calls live, don't miss out. You can join us for the future sessions at cloudposse.com/office hours. I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. You can find all the recordings at youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, let's see what's on the docket. All right, perfect. So someone dropped this in the office hours chat, not my expertise. But Jeremy White has a lot of interesting thoughts on this one. So Jeremy, what's the deal? Like what I think all of us can feel, at least speaking for myself, is overload, tool fatigue when it comes to agentic coding, best practices and tools and things like that. And this is probably amazing, but I've tuned it out at this point because I have a workflow working for me, but I have FOMO. Why should I have FOMO on Pi?
I don't know if you really need to. The way that Pi works is you'll probably end up picking it when you don't have a workflow and you're trying to build your own. I think that's what it really excels at, and it shows that um, in things that have pulled from the Pi Mono sort of community. When
And what
you
is
when you
the,
look at the repo,
for
yeah.
context, what is the Pi Mono community?
Yeah, so the idea is that software should be very easy to modify. You should actually start, with a really good SDK, one that's friendly to agentic software, that's something that is trivial to uh, update to what you need. And yeah, and by the way, I shouldn't take credit for starting on this one too, because this was mentioned on office hours, I think a few sessions back, by the way.
I
I
think
forget
so.
who originally mentioned it. But yeah, that's really what the Pi Mono community is. And if you go to the actual repo, you'll find that, I mean, it's Pi Coding Agent is just one facet of what Pi Mono is, which is it gives you an RPC piece. It gives you all these different entry points into what is just a very finely tuned set of hooks and lots of patterns on how to use them. And I would say, folks, you're going to be fueled by FOMO all throughout this because everybody's getting excited and they're just sharing their dopamine trips over using, just new technology around this, right? It still feels new, at least for a lot of people. Did I answer your question? Oh,
Well, I think it's, oops, I didn't mean to go into that. Hold on. There we go. Um, I'm trying to see where to begin. So it's a little abstract for me, to be honest, still. So,
well, here's a good example.
so let me say the parts that I understand is like a built writing software, so it's easier for you or it to self-mutate and extend it. And then, the concept of skills and agents to make that easier. And then is this a generic way that if you follow like spec kit, if you follow this, your software will be easier to maintain in the long run?
So I think that it's um what can I say? If you look at what they talk about on the repo, I think the best example is the MCP.
Hmm.
So Pi coding agent doesn't come with MCP. In fact, what they suggest you do is just implement it. And if you take the examples from the repo, give it to anything like Claude or whatever else, and you just say, hey, can you follow these patterns and add MCP? It will.
Mm.
I've tried several things like that. It's more about the fact that you can just ask Pi coding agent to change itself, and it does, and it has all the facilities to just immediately refresh and iterate on that change. So change the status bar, add totally new UI, add confirmations, add sub agents and everything else, and it just does it for you as you ask for it right there. And
Okay.
so it gives you the ability to turn off anything you want, and it starts with nothing
Mhm.
because it has so many different hook points and styles and ways to overload and to mutate what it does. And it's very
I
well
got you.
documented that it really is it's not that it's a jack of all trades
Yeah, yeah,
or a master of one. It's a blank slate in the most utter sense where
yeah.
um the
I
very entry
got
point has dozens of different ways to hook into it. I
so
think that's what's so powerful.
so it's almost like a bare bones toolkit or framework that lets you build your own flavor of an agentic development environment.
I
It has
think
all the
flavor,
fundamental it
I
has
think
all the
flavor
fundamental
is
primitives.
understating. Yeah, sorry.
So it has all the fundamental primitives. What were you saying?
I think that flavor would be underselling it. This is where you can, I would want to say you can completely change it to be something much more than something that's agentic.
Hmm.
That was the case of what happened with OpenClaw, right? And it's easy to forget that that came from this, and that this is really
Really?
what's underpinning. Yeah, a lot of folks don't realize that, but OpenClaw really is running off of this, right? That's one example
So
of what
not
it.
spiritually, not it literally has an origin in pi.
Yeah, that
Wow.
and that's one of those things that is easy to miss. But I think that's because the PyMono project isn't really concerned with if folks go and make OpenClaw, cool. And in fact, they've had vacations where they totally turn off everything on the repo and just say, "Hey, we're not accepting any contributions." They had one of those PR vacations. It was very awesome that they do that. But yeah, they're more about what can we do to make this better for modification, and that's their core and central focus. And that's why I
Oh,
forget which office hours, but I mentioned earlier, like somebody just went in and just asked it to create a when was this? This was we were talking about being able to control your agents from your phone,
yeah.
right? And at that about that same time, somebody had just asked Pi coding agent, "Hey, I'd like to control this with an Android app," and just had the whole thing generate a I forget what the name of the project is now, but they just generated an Android app that you could put on your phone and look at that. I'm running RPC and it's actually got all of my tools and everything, and you can just iterate on that, and it just takes
Yeah.
you I would say an afternoon to add a new feature, and then maybe a weekend of iteration to get it to where it feels like it was always built in. And I
I
think that's what's so powerful about it. But
And interesting, it came from exe.dev. I didn't realize that. They're the ones who obviously made the cool like SSH style sandboxes that you can
yeah,
use SSH here and get a terminal.
yeah, but I think that the pattern is what's important about Pi Mono more than anything else. It's ask yourself, how could you make your application instead of more complicated or bigger? Like imagine if you did this with Atmos, right? What would be your ideal thing? It would be that every single part of your infrastructure has its own Atmos running, and
Mhm.
it's just instead you're asking things to modify how they, for instance, work with TF state or whatever
Mm.
else. Hey, I would like to have something on my watch. Let me know when this happens.
Yeah.
Um,
So it can be
and
incorporated into projects like that.
Yeah, and building a light duty sort of application that is agent first and has lots of ways for that agent to readily modify it is what I think uh makes this a very cool pattern. And I
Yeah,
saw in the chat somebody said what tools this we're talking about the PyMono project and the Pi coding agent in particular,
yeah,
which is from Bad Logic slash PyMono.
yeah. And the URL is PyDev.
Oh
Um,
yes, that's the actual landing page.
I'll,
Pi.dev.
I'll post that here. All right, so that was that. Definitely a nerd sniped me. I got to go check that out this weekend. Um, Another little announcement. So we've done demos on Atmos native CI many times for those of you who have been on office hours. One of the improvements we just made to this demo, though, is now it supports a merge queue. And why that's interesting is for anyone who's been in the Terraform ecosystem for some while, there's always been this whole debate on whether apply before merge or apply after merge. And there are different camps. And obviously, the right answer is apply after merge. But the whole Atlantis camp is different. And it's interesting because Atlantis really went against the you could say industry norm for continuous delivery, which is don't merge the pull requests until everything is deployed. And there are definite strengths with that, right? Where there's never a risk that at least at deploy time that it didn't work. And if it didn't work, you can iterate on it and fix that in the pull request. But the downside is that you are manipulating the graph iteratively through a pull request and poor audit trails and reproducibility with that in the long run. So it's a pattern that works, but not recommended. Merge queues are really nice because you get the best of both worlds. So in a merge queue, you can open up a pull request like this example here. And when you merge it, you add it instead to a merge queue. And what that does is it will automatically deploy it on merge in a temporary branch that's created. And if it doesn't pass, it gets rejected and the pull request is back to an open state. This is an example of doing that with Atmos and native CI for our demo here. I'm not going to do a demo on this today, but if you are using Atmos and native CI, it's a pretty cool um, pattern to adopt. And I'll share the link here for that. All right, next. Yeah. Wow. I can't remember the last time there was such a nice little hack like this one. It brings me back to the good old days in the 90s when there are always these simple little exploits in the Linux kernel and you could root any machine you ever wanted to. Well, basically every version of Linux for the last, what was it, since 2017, for the last 11 years, has this very simple hack. All it requires is that you can execute some code on that machine. It doesn't need to be privileged. It's not a race condition. It's just a logic flaw in the Linux kernel. And yeah, so what's interesting about this exploit, and I think some of the other things that also Paul shared earlier, is just kind of how open source has been changed forever with the advent of AI. And this whole concept of like embargoes and how they used to work doesn't really apply anymore because when security vulnerabilities get opened up, there's usually multiple people even opening up the same vulnerability. I don't think it happened in this case. Um, but even if they don't announce it, there are other AI systems that are looking at the pull requests, trying to see is this pull request covering up a security hole or security patch, and the cat's out of the bag anyways. So within open source, it is full transparency all the way today. And copy fail is an example of that. What's scary about this, though, is can you imagine the number of devices operating Linux since 2017 that are probably never going to get an update? At this point, just assume every router out there, every little Raspberry Pi, etc., they're all rootable should anything get on them. So yeah, anyone have more insights on the copy fail bug?
I think this is one of those bugs which is only affects if they have access to your machine, right? So in order to run this, they have
Right.
to have.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a not a RCE, remote code execution vulnerability.
Right.
But like, any transient dependency that runs a command could do this. Any GitHub action workflow, anything, I believe they said that even under certain circumstances, you could escape sandboxes too. So,
Hmm.
because this is executing at the kernel level, which is outside of the sandbox and the constraints of the container.
And I think the copy fail one, this one, I think was disclosed properly for what that matters. Like it gave some overhead. It was the other one. I think it was called something like Dirty Frog. That was the one which
Dirty,
just
dirty
that just
frag,
skipped
somebody else
everything, right?
was
It skipped
sharing. Yeah.
embargoes. It just
Did we? I don't think we talked about that one.
oh, I just popped a link to the Wiz.io blog post about it. Those, yeah, there we go. The second one there. I think those were the guys to announce it.
Man, Wiz, they are on a roll.
They really are.
Uh,
Yeah, and then you include the, like Tanstat got hacked. So
Yeah.
imagine those folks probably employing stuff like this to keep, digging deeper into what they can control.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't. It was just too painful to share the Tan Stack one too. Like, just there's just too many of like every week, major projects coming out with CVEs. So, um, yeah. So how did Dirty Frag work?
I believe it's super similar to CopyFail in that this is also not an RCE. It's a you have to have access to the machine in order to do it. And I
Mhm.
think it makes of use of two vulnerabilities. So it does one, then it does another, and then it gains access.
But
And
it
that's why I
doesn't
think, oh
it
yeah?
doesn't fault. It doesn't create a fault. So it's harder to detect.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, it leaves less of a trace, I think was one of the tricky things about this.
Mm. Well, all right. Well, all the more reason
What
to go update all your Kubernetes clusters if you haven't done that.
I'm guessing you guys have done it all. In Renovate Bot, do you just by default have something like delay your updates by 3 days? Because I feel
Yeah,
like that's the way to go.
yeah. I forget we have a cooldown period.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's supported by Renovate and Dependabot, and we do that on especially all NPM based ecosystems.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel like
I mean, yeah, cool.
I feel like one silly thought I'm getting recurring over the last 2 weeks is everybody was talking about how shipping infrastructure was going to be a bottleneck for new features and software, but I feel like it's more going to become a bottleneck for all the security patches that we're having to do nowadays. Because
Uh,
think about right now, if you had something like this and you didn't have IAC to help you go and patch everything, and it hurts on another level.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I just gotta hope that there's just so much low-hanging fruit right now that at the computational level of AI that it's just making mincemeat out of the human written code and finding these vulnerabilities. I can't imagine that it's going to be at this level in 2 years from now. Software's got to be a lot more robust by that time, I'm hoping. So that was the copy fail. So this is, I kind of alluded to this a little bit. This was another post that was trending on Hacker News and talks about this whole like, in the traditionally speaking, the etiquette of security researchers is to, reach out confidentially to the maintainers of some project and disclose the vulnerability, or to, a commercial entity, that there's some problem, there'd be an embargo for a certain amount of time, allowing the vendor to patch, fix, release, and then communicate that internally to their customers before letting the cat out of the bag, and every hacker out there knows about it. And the new reality, which is that that's no longer enforceable, at least within open source. And makes me think also about, I'm not justifying it, but it makes me think about cal.com reaching the conclusion a few weeks ago that they're going closed source now, and they moved the fork, if you will, now is going to be cal.diy. And their argument was that with open source, it's impossible to keep a product secure anymore because of all the AI, AI security companies and hackers leveraging AI. I think it's a very flawed conclusion. It just means now you're going to have fewer people doing the same thing, and any invested hacker who wants to do that can now do that also with your TypeScript React front end, right? I mean, what's preventing an AI from downloading all the pack files and understanding more or less the entire front end and understanding how that works? Because almost every app is React these days. Shannon shares, what is this link here? Speaking of security research, this is something I worked on and open to feedback for questions. So yeah, that was the end more or less of that conversation there. And before I move on, was there any other comments on this whole movement, you could say, or change to security disclosures and embargoes and their futility? All right. Shannon, I'll get to that link right after the first set of announcements here. So anyone operating in US East 1, if you're unlucky to be in one of the availability zones that was hit by what keeps happening by one of the cooling outages there, condolences or hearts to you. It lasted for a prolonged amount of time. I was talking to somebody else in the community at the same time, and he said he was flabbergasted. He could not even provision net new AWS accounts in Control Tower because apparently Control Tower was running on EC2, and EC2 was one of the affected services. So I don't believe the RCA, the root cause analysis, has fully come out, but it appears to be cooling related. Anyone know more? And again, it's always US East 1. Best bet for stability is, if you're building out net new infrastructure, it still holds true. Pick any region other than US East 1. I don't know why.
Yeah, unless you get suckered into paying for CloudFront, then it's like kind of like, you kind of have to do it there.
Is CloudFront still just US East 1? Like,
last I checked.
Huh.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are still US East 1 like that.
It's ironic given CloudFront
things.
is a global CDN.
Right.
Well, there's also
global
features...
means US East 1 is what it actually means.
Yes.
So.
Well, yes. I mean, the control plane is there. I mean, they must have nodes outside of East 1, right? If not, then my mind is right now blown after working with this for so long, 20 years. Nothing else on that one? All right. Yeah, so this one here, this is was a satire CVE, but what makes it fun or interesting is that, at first you might not even realize that as you start reading through it until it starts just getting a little bit too absurd. And the thing is, it's close to almost reality that it's believable or plausible. So this is the scary times we live in, and how I think a lot of discovery of CVEs and vulnerabilities are, well, aside from the ones from researchers actually going at it, are by lucky by coincidence or luck, and things could have been a lot worse. Like the XV vulnerability was probably one of the worst that we've had in recent time with the compression library, and that was just discovered by accident. This is probably means more to me than anyone else, but I've always been following Copilot a little bit on the side. This is Amazon CLI for managing ECS. ECS is such an interesting technology in the sense that, it's so simple on the one hand, but and we see more and more adoption, but still the tooling for ECS doesn't stick around for a while. I think there's been 4 projects out of AWS to build CLIs for ECS, and
I've used all of them.
Yeah, I've used all of them too, in some capacity. And the Copilot, I was actually, I thought that this was the best one yet that they had done, but I guess it failed to get legs or traction, and it's gone by the wayside. Makes me think of EKS Cuddle, which is still, I believe, the Amazon official way. And it's interesting how there are so many tools and tooling for EKS that survive. But even EKS Cuddle by Amazon, but not any ECS class. The drama here was last year, if you remember, there was a post 1 or 2 weeks before reInvent where they were going to announce that they were end of support for AWS Copilot. And then the post was immediately deleted, but it had already spread through, news outlets. And if you dug through some GitHub issues, you could find references to it. In the commit history, you could find references to the commit that was announcing that, but they had rolled it back. So then it was, oh, this is interesting. There must be some dynamic going on inside of AWS here. Or maybe they're announcing some new feature at reInvent, and this is, I don't know. And this is why they were going to shut it down. Well, no new features really came out of reInvent, and still a year later, it was abandoned. So, Zach, you're nerd sniping me there. Zach asks, real question, what is your ideal developer CI/CD workflow for ECS targeted workloads? And for the longest time, I would say we had none. But now I'm really happy with and really enjoy using our native CI in Atmos. And native CI in Atmos works really well with ECS. So the link I shared above in this Zoom chat is to our Atmos native CI demo, and that is for ECS deployments. So check it out. Let me know what you think.
Thank you, I will.
And yeah, we'd be happy to do a demo of that again another time. And what's cool about that is then you can still use Terraform, but you're using Terraform natively in GitHub Actions, and you don't need third-party GitHub Actions, and it's all self-contained with one simple CLI command. And it supports preview environments. All right, introducing the Claude platform on AWS. Yeah, so everyone's scratching their head here who works at an enterprise that's today using Claude with Bedrock and wondering, wait, I thought we were doing that. My understanding here is that this is more like running Grafana, AWS managed Grafana on AWS, where it's a managed service of actually Grafana. And not just giving access to the model in this case for Opus and Sonnet and so forth. The other reason this is probably there is so enterprises can launder their AWS budgets to pay for AI code generation. Because this supports, among other things, payment through the AWS Marketplace. And also, it does have IAM integration, so you can use your IAM permissions architecture on AWS to also govern how you access Claude. So interesting. I wonder how this is going to play out. Anyone know more about this? Yeah, so some of the funny comments are like, yeah, just why did our AWS bill just 10x? Fair point. For smaller companies spending, 100K a month on AWS, trust me, that's a lot of money for me, yeah. But adding 20K, that's 20% bump. But if you're spending, $5 million a month on AWS and you rack up, an extra 100,000 on AI, through Claude or something, it probably just rounds out in the end. All right, let's see. So this was an interesting, unfortunate announcement, but these days, par for the course. Every single company out there is announcing AI influence, reduction in force, or layoffs. GitLab now being one of them. And Paul shared a link to I forget who his name at Terra Team who posted this. But what was interesting about this announcement is what it didn't say. So GitLab, they're gearing up for Act 2. If you've been following some of the announcements here in office hours, Cloudflare came out with their agentically friendly VCS system based on Git. So if you need to create millions of repositories because you're building the next Lovable, you can use Cloudflare to do that. There are many other companies in this space. I'm just drawing a blank. We talked about another one last week. I just can't remember who it was. So here you have GitLab. They are now going to be redirecting resources and engineering towards reinventing what GitLab is in the post-AI world. Presumably support for more repositories and whatever AI guardrails go along with that for engineering. There was also the upstart or the startup from one of the former GitHub founders. Was it everything.co or something? I forget. So rethinking VCS is now a thing. So they're laying off a sizable portion. I think it was like 20, was it 20% or 30%? 30%. And they're doing the rollouts in an interesting way. They're first allowing people to choose who wants to leave first, and then they're going to figure out what to do with the rest with that. But what everyone was probably expecting to see when reading this was why they didn't mention, because now we are the best alternative to GitHub, maybe, or something like that. I'm still bullish on GitHub, and I'm not switching, but I'm surprised that they didn't bring up something related to that this is a perfect opportunity for them to shine while GitHub is having all of these stability issues. And that was not said. So I don't know if that's out of professional courtesy or honor among thieves or something, but anyone have more thoughts on this one? All right, that was that. And that was the end of those updates. Next update was just, so I mentioned that we added support for in our Atmos native CI, which has nothing to do with Atmos Pro. In our open source Atmos, we have support for merge queues. Now we are doing the same thing for Atmos Pro. We're adding support for merge queues in Atmos Pro. And this is what's really cool, because only a product that is built natively as a GitHub app for GitHub can take advantage of merge queue type events. If you're piggybacking just on GitHub, but not a GitHub app, it's harder to do that. So I don't believe there's a way, for example, that Atlantis would work conveniently with merge queues. But correct me if I'm wrong. What else? The next updates were, so one of the things that we rolled into Atmos Pro is code owners validation. And this is where it's interesting. Why would we add this to a product like Atmos Pro? A few fold. So Atmos Pro is both how you can operationalize running Atmos at an organization enterprise-wide scale. But it's also what we use to manage Cloud Posse as well. And one of the things we've been doing forever is implementing GitHub Actions, for example, to verify code owners. Interesting thing about code owners is you can open a pull request that references bogus teams and merge that thinking you're protected, and it did nothing. So unless you actually validate and verify that the teams are valid, you don't know that that code owners is protecting you. On top of that, the scopes for a standard GitHub token don't allow you to query the teams and owners and groups in a org to validate it. So you have to create a GitHub app or a personal access token. And then you have another static token floating around or another GitHub app that you have to manage. So we ran into this personally because we were using a GitHub app and we revoked the token just out of an abundance of caution, given everything going on. And I'm like, I don't want to go update 300, 400 repos for this. So what we're moving towards is instead, well, this is something that everyone could benefit from. There's nothing that really does this kind of validation. We just bake that into Atmos Pro. So when it's installed, when a pull request is open, modifies the code owners, you can turn on a feature flag that will validate your code owners file and the teams exist. So even if you use nothing else of Atmos, you at least get that. Of course, that's not what we're trying to sell. So that's that. And the other cool thing that we did is we added MCP support to Atmos Pro. So what's really interesting about this is because Atmos Pro has a data model of every single run, every component that was deployed, all the GitHub action workflows tied to a component, and that component is tied to a stack. And because it has drift detection, which detects if the component is still passing, the root module is passing, or started to fail, it has all that history. Now, what we can do with the MCP is very conveniently in Cloud just say, hey, pull up the latest drift from the past week and tell me, if any of these need local remediation in the code, or remediate it by reapplying it, and it can re-trigger the GitHub action workflow to reapply that, and it's just convenient from your IDE. But the other use case is for remediating failures. So a real life example would be in github.com Cloud Posse infra live. We have some infrastructure that was deployed before we were using Atmos Pro, before we were using the GitHub Actions. So it exists in the repo. It was enabled, but it was actually never appropriately deployed, so it was failing. So what I was able to do was using the Atmos Pro MCP, was ask it to remediate the failures and update the components along the way so that this works. And one of the little tidbits, at least that works well for us and we've been doing, is always having Claude as part of the process document its fixes along the way. And this becomes like a living change log almost, but at a technical level that is great for the agents to reference in the future on how you arrived at the current conclusion, why it is the way it is, what are the failure cases you typically encounter, and now you have a database of all that information that makes the process better and better as you go. So in this case, this is the pull request that was opened. You can see that it was able to get everything to plan correctly, and then we merged that pull request. Shannon?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so how are you tracking that? You're saying you were, kind of doing like a running change log, if you will. So just
Yeah.
curious how you're tracking that or how you're recording that.
Well, so the reality is this is where you cannot do it anymore just easily using one CLI invocation. What you need is a database somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept that I like to think about is like for anybody who's does a little bit of their own QuickBooks or finance is that you have double entry accounting. So
Mm-hmm.
you have all these transactions that happen that came in, and then you need to reconcile those with what the bank account has. So
Right.
your
Mm-hmm.
version control system is basically your bank account. You need to reconcile that with the infrastructure, and to do that, you need a database somewhere. So that the secret here is, we aren't the only one, obviously. There's a dozen companies that do similar things, but this is the way we do it. And
Got it.
Atlas Pro is how we did that. So then when we log into a system like this, we can go into, I want to go to a different workspace. Cloud Posse demos. So then what we have is a history of everything failing. So we surfaced the repairs here. I can click on that. And here are all instances of drift in our infrastructure. And each one of these corresponds to a deployment on GitHub Actions where we ran Terraform plan, got the exit code, and we track it here. So it exited code 2. So now we know these are all the instances that are
Mhm.
drifting across the repositories where we have it set up.
Isn't that also something similar to what Spacelift does as well?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
Spacelift has that,
Got it.
the Scalar does that, Terraform Cloud does that, Terraform Enterprise does that. There's a Terra Team, Terramate, you name it. It's a solved problem. It's just, pick your flavor.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But so the cool thing then is now you have that data somewhere in a database, then you can use an MCP to as a context efficient way to query that information. So in Cloud Code, you can use that. Cloud Code can have your AWS MCPs, your Sentry MCPs, your Atmos Pro MCPs, and it can basically help you remediate anything very quickly. And what I like about it personally, it's like it's not another service just to handle remediations. Like, why do I need a service to do that when Cloud Code is perfectly fine for that? So it's just a thin little layer that you can tie into that to get that capability. All right, so that was that. And yeah, that's all the announcements I had. There was one thing you shared. Was it Shannon? Let's see. Scrolling up here. So Shannon, you want to share what your project is here? I am exposure on GitHub, what the AI assisted dorking found in the wild.
Yeah, it was just I'm doing a lot of research in AI security stuff. So I, created this tool and I, basically the idea around it was, just to see what kind of patterns and stuff like that it came back with initially. But I did scan like over 200 public repos out there and I did find a couple of exposed secrets and I actually reported them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So,
Huh.
yeah.
That's great because GitHub has gotten pretty good at this, and they have their built-in secret scanning stuff. And I thought that was not happening so much. That's pretty amazing that you were able to find that with this tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, the idea is, to make this, available for folks that, that are doing a lot of, heavy development and, let's say if they have multiple repos, if they would just want to, triple check their, make sure that there's no exposed secrets before deploying it, or before shipping it out, like kind of a thing.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
cool. Thanks for sharing.
yeah,
So that link is in the Zoom chat if anyone's curious.
yeah.
It looks super useful. Thank you for sharing that, Al.
Thank you.
Clean site too. I like it.
Thank you.
Gene C?
Yes, thank you. I have two questions that I would like to ask. Yes,
Yeah,
hi
go for it.
Eric. I'm Jancy, AWS community leader and just admitted to AWS New Voices Call to based in Kinshasa, DRC. I've been writing a Telegram series and discussing this topic with all, and the idea of moving from DynamoDB to S3 native looking came up to simplify our Telegram stack. From your experience and at Cloud Post, do you see the shift as the new production standard, or are there edge cases where DynamoDB is still superior for high concurrency environments?
So yeah, so let me pardon me, it's a little hard to hear due to the audio, but let me try and paraphrase as much as I can. So Gene C is working on a article on Terragrunt and updating how to use native state file locking as with your backend, presumably when using object store. And the question is whether we've seen any issues with that, any reasons to stay with DynamoDB. And the answer is pretty straightforward. I believe DynamoDB support is actually deprecated and or will be, and therefore it is imperative that everyone who is using S3 or object storage as a backend on AWS to move to the native file locking or the object locking capabilities. We've done that across the board. Every customer is using that. We use it ourselves. Every new implementation does it. I haven't encountered any issues with that feature that we didn't also experience with DynamoDB and logs.
Okay, so thank you. My second question is regarding Terraform imports. Regarding legacy infrastructure, native Terraform imports is notoriously tedious. For teams moving towards a structural environments like Terragrant or Atmos, what is your take on tools like Terraformer or AWS AI Generator for bulk imports? Do you trust generated code, or is there a cloud post way to migrate existing resources without the manual overhead?
Yeah, a few things on that. At least this is just what comes to mind. So let me paraphrase the question, whatnot. So the question is regarding Terraform imports, which I interpret as one way, right? So Terraform has the ability, if you've defined some Terraform resources, you can specify the IDs of those of existing resources, and when you run the Terraform plan, it'll import those into the state, and you can adopt basically existing infrastructure. And then you have the concept of like adopting already provisioned infrastructure for which there is no existing Terraform code. And over the years, many tools have evolved to try and solve that, Terraformer being a popular one, or at least a famous one. I'd be curious if any of those tools, what the level of maintenance is on them, given where we are at today. Here's one of the problems with those kinds of tools like Terraformer that help you import resources. They help you scratch and hitch. And once that itch is scratched, you never touch the tool again. So the churn on those kind of tool ecosystems was huge because it's like a dating site, right? If they work really well, all your users leave. And the same is true for a tool that imports infrastructure. Now, there was something really interesting with, if I recall correctly, it was with Spacelift, and they had this tool called Spacelift Intent. And I think there was some way that you could basically use that to help you import your existing infrastructure into a database that then Space Lift Intent could help you export ultimately as HCL. But as others here will say, I think these days I wouldn't do any of that. If I was assigned a project where we had to import a bunch of legacy infrastructure into IAC for the purposes of managing it, without rewriting it, without re-architecting, just like basically a photocopy of that, then I would go the MCP route. So I would set up the MCPs for AWS. They have like 65 MCPs or something, and they work remarkably well. And those MCPs, together with Cloud Code, you can probably generate all the HCL that you need to represent that infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
All right. So what have I missed in the chat here? A lot of chat going on today. Any other interesting
I was just
other-
mentioning that Bedrock has just not as good a speed as some providers. That's what I've noticed.
Oh, really?
I think that was the one thing that I was harping on there, and that if you're running locally, the quant stuff is actually catching up. You might be able to run a lot of models locally better than ever before. So reset your expectations maybe by the end of the year.
Yeah, I I bought a maxed out laptop at the end of last year, hoping to do more local AI, and then I realized I just couldn't get much done at a close to frontier level. That said, I am doing now. I just found this Type Whisper. Like this is a dime a dozen, right? There's 50 of these voice transcription apps. This is the latest one I'm testing, and this one supports local models, so you can download them, create workflows on how it curates and edits the transcripts. And so far, I'm digging it, and it supports like Gemini and what is the NVIDIA model for voice transcription. It uses that, so fully local AI for voice transcription. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yep, I've used that, and it's pretty light. I was using it on. I didn't have to use more than I want to say 16 gigs of VRAM to get it to go really fast. At least in my
Yeah.
opinion.
It is pretty absurd. I remember when you brought that up, you were using it for something else. I laughed at using
Oh, completion, yeah,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
was
8
trying to
gigs of
get
RAM
good
for
completion.
autocomplete, right?
Well, now it's a third of that, so that's cool. So now it's more like 24 gigs of VRAM.
Hmm.
Um, and it's looking like again by the end of the year it might be all the way down to most consumer level video cards by the end of the year.
Yeah, that'll be
Uh,
cool.
I have been testing FreeFlow, and it has given me the same experience as WhisperFlow, but with Grok API, and it
Hmm,
is probably faster actually.
really? Yeah, and is it good on technical jargon, technical language?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been good. I mean, I don't think there will be a tool better than WhisperFlow, but like
Hmm.
for our open source tool, this almost gave the same experience.
Yeah. Custom. Cool. Yeah, I will evaluate this depending on how things go with
Yeah.
the other one, TypeFlow. Yeah. All right. Any other cool little open source projects we should promote on the show today? Any other questions we can answer? All right. Well, then that that's a wrap, I think. We'll end it a couple minutes early here. It's the end of the hour or end of our office hours here anyways. So let me wrap up here. All right. Well, that wraps up office hours for this week. If you are using Cloud Posse's open source or ever get stuck and you need some help with DevOps, Terraform, AWS, we can help you out. Go to cloudposse.com/support. If you are new to office hours and want to catch up on the past episodes, we post all of them to the standard channels, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and so forth, so you can catch up on past episodes. And here are the ways you can get more involved. If you haven't registered for our live office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours, enter your email, and you'll get an invite. Join our Slack community at cloudposse.com/Slack. If you do that, go to the office hours channel, and that's where I post all the links that we discuss every week. If you found something interesting, you can post it in there and we'll discuss it on office hours. And lastly, our newsletter goes out about once a month. Go to cloudposse.com/newsletter, where I kind of get on my armchair and share my thoughts on where things are at. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Thanks.